Hello, and welcome to Represent the Podcast, the show where I, Caiti Beth McKinney, sit down with composers from historically marginalized and underrepresented backgrounds and discuss their works for the horn. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for tuning in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Represent the Podcast, the show where I talk to composers from historically underrepresented backgrounds about their works for the horn. My name is Caiti Beth McKinney, and today I have Gina Gillie. I'm super excited to have her here. She is a professor of horn at Pacific Lutheran University, as well as a performer, composer, horn player extraordinaire. So, Gina, thank you for being here today. I'm so excited.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So we'll just jump right in. How did you start in music and in composition? And those can be completely two different answers if you want.
I basically started music in utero as a young child. I sang in children's choirs. I started in band in junior high, and that was because I was a singer before then. And when I got to junior high, there was a new junior high, and the choir director there was not too great. And I had an older sister, and she said, "Don't do choir." And so I said, "But I have to do music." And so I took band, and I was really skeptical about it because those band kids are a little nutty.
We can be wild.
So I took band. I started immediately on the horn. The very first few sounds that I made on it, my memory is that I sounded amazing. I don't know how I actually sounded, but I thought it was great. So it was like love at first, whatever.
First note.
First note, yes. So I did band in junior high. Then in high school, I went back and I did choir as well as band. And I showed an inclination for composing when I was young. In high school, I decided to write a vocal trio for Anthony's speech in my English class. And I was really proud of it and showed it to my choir director. And what I remember from that interaction is that he just told me I had a bunch of voice leading errors. I was expecting, wow, this is great. I'm so glad you're writing music. And it was, yeah, your voice leading is wrong.
That must have been so disappointing.
It was a little crushing. How was I to know? I had zero compositional training. And so I was expecting something like, well, here, let me help you discover the things that are some rules. And I'm really excited that you had this creative idea. Anyway, I didn't let it deter me too much. And I wrote a piano solo for my senior project. But when I was in graduate school, when I studied with Douglas Hill, and he had all of his students write original music. Sometimes it was etudes. Sometimes it was actual compositions. And the very first thing that I wrote were some etudes. And then we had a original compositions project where I wrote my 3 unaccompanied pieces, which is out and people can play it. But that was my first thing for horn. And it was really funny. I was cleaning my office the other day and I found my notes that after my lessons at the UW-Madison, I would listen back to them and take notes. And so one lesson we were talking about composing, and Doug told me that I had a knack for one thing, but then I'd forgotten this. He said, "You don't say anything creative or new." But
that's a little harsh.
I know, but I'd forgotten about that. But it was true, I was just speaking the type of language that I'd always been playing and learning. It was like classical and romantic era type language, harmonic and melodic language. But anyway, I kept writing music, and for my dissertation, for my doctorate, I wrote a piece that a lot of people know, To the Seasons. And it was big work. And that was really my first big work. And it's still a pretty big work.
Yeah, it's substantial. And it's gorgeous. Yeah. It's one of my favorite pieces right now. And I say right now, it's been one of my favorite pieces for 3 years or something like that. So yeah, I'm right on board. I'm one of those fans of To the Seasons.
So, but apparently at some point I did come up with something unique to say, at least unique enough that people want to play it and sing it. So Yeah, that's kind of how I got on the composition train.
Very cool. And I'm guessing, you said you sing, are you also a soprano? Is that how you
Yes.
chose? Ah, that makes a lot of sense how you chose soprano.
Yeah, I was a very high soprano when I was younger, coloratura soprano, and I just sang to the seasons back in September. I did a concert with Mark Robbins from the Seattle Symphony, and he asked me to write a piece of music for the new space. Pale Blue Dot was my newest piece, and I was like, okay. It was for electronics, and I'd never done electronics, so that was scary. That's why I wasn't sure. But he convinced me I could do it. And then he said, "Well, how about we program to the seasons on that concert as well?" And I said, "Great, who's your singer?" And he said, "Well, you are."
You're the original, you gotta do it.
That's right. I was like, "Oh, okay. I haven't sung this in a decade. Here we go."
Oh, that's great. I
So
hope it
I
went well.
had It did. It went
Oh,
really well,
good.
but I had to get back on that horse
Mhm.
pronto.
I believe it.
I took some voice lessons with my colleague here at PLU, Dr. Cho, and she is terrific. I really like working with her. And she got me in shape and got me ready, and we did it.
I'm curious, do you find that taking voice lessons ever helps with how you think about the horn? Because I've spoken to some brass players who love taking voice lessons for that reason.
In some ways, yes, there's a breathing component, and there's also a little bit of a body positioning component too. And one thing I've discovered is the the place of your hips or the place of your pelvis and how you interact with the lower part of your abdomen is really helpful for my horn playing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
I imagine that has to do with like alignment and things
Yeah,
of
it
that
has to do
sort.
with alignment. It has to do with the pelvic floor and how that supports
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing in terms of a lot of high range stuff.
Right. Oh, that's incredible. I'm gonna have to experiment with that.
Yeah.
So obviously you chose to compose for horn because you're a horn player. That's probably the easy answer here, right? But do
Mm-hmm.
you find that there were any difficulties when you were starting out composing besides, people saying maybe crushing things to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I really don't remember those things as being crushing. I've even forgotten that Doug had said it wasn't original, but
I love that.
yeah. And he's gonna hear that again and be like, "What? I have it written in my
Yeah,
notes."
be like, I can prove it.
Um, yeah. In terms of writing for the horn, did I find anything to be difficult? Not really, because I knew the instrument. I know the instrument so well. And at that level in graduate school, you're really working at a fine level with the instrument itself. So I didn't find it difficult to write for the instrument. One thing I do find myself wanting to do is that when I compose for horn, I do like to play what I'm writing, and most especially for the articulation markings,
Sure.
because I'll sing something some way and write it down, and then I'll play it on my horn, and I will articulate it differently because I want to play it differently on my horn just a little bit. So what I find most helpful about having the instrument and playing the instrument when I'm writing is for articulation markings.
So do you start by singing a melody and then you notate it, or what's your composition process?
Yeah, it comes in different shapes and sizes, but usually I will sing something. I'll just start improvising vocally. Sometimes I'll come up with a parameter that is, say, a type of scale or a set of notes, and I'll start improvising on the horn with those different things. Like with Pale Blue Dot, which was my most recent composition, I had a combination of pitches that I came up with for a water glass sound. And I was trying to find a melody for the horn, and I realized that I could use this collection of pitches that I had created for a different instrument. And so I started improvising on those pitches, and that eventually spun out into a larger and longer melody. So it usually starts with singing. It usually starts with melody, but sometimes it starts with a parameter of some sort that's a collection of pitches or a type of scale or a type of harmony.
And then when you go to add something like piano, because you have your sonata as well, right? And you got these,
Hmm.
more complicated piano parts, do you tend to kind of figure that out on your own, or do you collaborate with pianists at all?
Usually I figure it out on my own. However, if it has anything to do with jazz, which sometimes it does, I have definitely asked pianists in the past. In fact, Bayou Boardwalk, which is one of the movements from Scenes from a Bayou,
Hmm.
was the brass trio. I talked to our, at the time, jazz instructor here at PLU, and I said, I have this tune, and I can kind of hear the jazz harmonies that I think I want, but I'm unsure. And so he came in and he realized some of the jazz harmonies that were possible with this melody that I'd written. I was like, yes, that's it. But I just didn't know the language
Hmm.
of how to come up exactly with those types of chords. So at that time, I recorded him playing it, and then I took the recording and I slowed it way down
Ooh.
so that I could actually dictate what he had what he played.
Oh, that's great.
So, I had to use my ear training,
It's good to know that comes in handy somewhere.
yeah, to help out. And I'm actually gonna meet with our new jazz director here in a little bit because I want to write. I'm writing a piece that's gonna be in a disco style,
Oh, cool.
and I feel like something that challenges me is writing really rhythmically interesting and driven piano parts. I'm really good at long melodies and slow moving harmonies, but I'm challenged by fast and really energetic stuff.
So typical
So
horn player things, that we always struggle
yeah,
with.
it's probably because of, yeah, my background. So I'm interested in getting some ideas about how to keep things peppy and how to keep things energized and moving forward.
Sure. And where do you find
Yeah,
inspiration for these melodies that you come up with? Or do they just pop into your head on their own?
pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm so jealous.
I'm sort of this font of endless melodies over here, but I do know that if I just come up with a melody at any point, I'm starting to realize my tendencies.
Mm,
And everybody has tendencies. That's why everyone's music sounds like them.
right.
You really can't get away from sounding like yourself. So it's fun that I'm starting to realize where I turn melodically or harmonically and when I do it. And so now when I sing improvised melodies, I try and surprise myself, which is hard to
Ooh.
do.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And try not to be um, predictable. I think that's so many composers' goal is to not be too predictable.
Right. But we can still always hear a John Williams melody when we hear one, even if
That's
they sound
right.
different.
Yeah.
I've said
Hmm.
this I've said this on other episodes of the podcast, but when I try and compose, I sit down at the piano and it inevitably sounds like Lord of the Rings. No matter what I do, it turns into Lord of the Rings. I'm like, well, okay, that's, what I listened to in high school nonstop, so here we are.
That's right. We are what we listen to for sure.
100%.
My husband always makes a joke about when you use Sibelius playback, because of the timbre of things, it sounds a little bit video gamey. And so everything I write, my husband's like, "Oh, that sounds like Legend of Zelda." And I'm like, "No, it
Like, stop ruining this for me.
doesn't."
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So, how would you characterize your compositional language then?
So, kind of like I mentioned before, melody. It's really about melody and it's almost always tonal. I have done some things that are branching into not tonal, but it always comes back to tonality. And so I try and find interesting ways to use tonality and melody. But that's who I am. So just keep writing melodies. And I think I have run across people who actually are really glad for the melodic component, because in some ways people have tried to get away from melody because that's what we've always done, and starts to be like, well, that's old, what's new, what's on the cutting edge. And so move away from so many things you can do with rhythm or with sound or with texture or whatever, which are all very cool things. But I'm still doing the melody thing, and maybe at some point I'll branch out a little farther, but that's what I do pretty well.
Well, there's the if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know?
Yeah, but one of the fun things about composing is there's endless possibilities.
Absolutely.
So whatever I feel like doing next, I can give it a try.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. You have the freedom to just say, well, this is what I'm going to play or what I'm going to write.
Mm-hmm.
So this is always my fun little personality trivia question. Who is your favorite composer besides yourself?
Yeah, I'm not my favorite composer. Every time I write something or I listen back to some of the stuff I've written, and I'm like, that's not the piece that I'm like, yes, it's the best piece ever. I haven't made that piece yet. It's what we're always striving for, I think. But to get back to your question,
Mhm.
I feel like I always have to qualify this, but my absolute favorite composer is John Williams.
Okay.
And I would say that his music brings me joy. And every time I listen to his music, I feel joyous.
That's so wonderful.
And I think that's beautiful.
Yes. I mean, that's why we're doing this, right? Is music makes us feel things. And I don't know about you, but I like to feel positive emotions sometimes, at least. So, anything that brings that little spark out in us is kind of the
Yeah.
reason we're doing this. That's so great. I love that answer, John Williams. Um, Very cool. What I would have to say that I was really influenced by film music growing up, and it's funny. I used to be an absolute John Williams hater because I was like, oh,
Oh,
he
really?
just stole. Oh yeah, he was like he just stole Mars from the planets. Blah, blah. But then the more I listened to an expanded body of his work, the Hook soundtrack and stuff like, how can you not just
Which has Hedwig's theme in it.
Yes, it does. But how can you not just love it? I mean, it's gorgeous. Even
Yeah.
when it's sad, it's gorgeous, and that's so much fun.
Yeah.
Have you played his concerto?
I worked on it with a student many, many years ago, and I have not personally played it, but it is hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Oh, but I love the Forest of Endor movement. I know that's not what it's called, but that's what it is, right? The Battle of the Trees, I think, is the movement. But yeah, it's
That's
so great.
great.
So to move it more towards the business side here, how do you find that you are doing a lot of commissions, or are you more just writing to write?
So since 2014, I think, there hasn't been a year when I don't have a commission.
That's great.
So, which is surprising to me, actually. I don't know if it should be
I don't think it
surprising.
should be, but that's cool that it is.
But so I've got I just today am getting going on a piece for band, which is
Ooh,
I've never written for large ensemble, so I said it's time, and I'm working with our ensemble directors here, and we're getting an idea going for getting something funded. But yeah, I'm always working on a commission, at least at this point. And it seems like every time I finish something, I've got maybe a week, and then somebody else will write to me
wow.
and say, I would love a piece. So I have yet to really not have a commission on my plate, but it's really good because it keeps me moving and it keeps me moving forward. And especially the commissions where people want me to do something that I haven't done
Hmm.
before, like writing for electronics or writing for band
Right.
or writing for an instrument that I haven't written before. So that's really great. The commissions are incredible. Thank you to everyone who's commissioned me.
And how do you typically get connected to commissioners? Do they just email you through your website or through your page?
They usually find me in different ways. Sometimes they've heard a piece of mine at a conference or a recital. Ooh, I like that. And so they'll reach out to me that way. Sometimes they've run across my music. Maybe they're studying at a college, and someone gives them my sonata or something.
Hmm.
Um, and just, yeah, various different ways. So hearing my music played somewhere, or talking to other people, I think.
And do they always have a specific performance in mind, or is it sometimes they're just like, I just want this piece and I'll play it someday? You know?
Most of the time they have a project. Most of the time they have either a recording project, or they have a commissioning project where they're wanting to get a collection of works by certain composers. They want new music by certain composers. Um, Sometimes they are wanting to do it on a recital. Most often it's connected to some sort of performance. Yeah, not too often do I get a commission and someone's like, I don't have any plans for this, but I'd like this piece.
Yeah, I imagine that would be a little more abstract than just being like, this
Yeah,
is what I'm doing.
yeah. And it does help with grant writing if you have a project
Oh, I bet we
behind.
could talk about grant writing all day.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on that? I'm sure that's
Mm.
a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I haven't done grant writing in a while, but having an interesting project is a good always a good thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any tips and tricks for the applications? Anything specific?
It probably depends on the grant, and it depends on what the stipulations of the grant are.
Hmm.
So if the grantors are looking for projects that specifically do something, like if they're looking for projects that increase diversity in a certain area, or if they're looking for projects that are a commentary on climate change, or if they're looking for projects that are community based in enrichment,
Hmm.
whatever the granting agency is, you want to have a project that speaks to their mission,
Right.
is what I would say.
And as I'm thinking about this, I know that in my personal experience and in the experience of my friends, a lot of us have been afraid to approach some of our favorite composers about commissioning works simply because we
Mm.
wouldn't know where to raise the funding.
Hmm.
So would you say that composers tend to help commissioners work towards finding that funding, or is it kind of all on the person who wants the piece?
I would say it's on the people who want the piece. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have not ever helped with raising the funds.
Hmm.
I'm not interested in doing that.
It's a lot of work.
Uh, it is, and I want to spend all my time with the creative side.
Sure.
And so, what I would say is, if you want to commission somebody that you really like and the fee's pretty steep, one of the best ways to do it is through a consortium
Hmm.
where you get a bunch of people together and everybody contributes $100 or something. And that's a lot easier. So, like, for example, in the Northwest Horn Society, recently, I decided that we as a society should commission a work for the the society. So
Hmm.
it was a horn sextet,
Oh, fun.
and Aaliyah Qualls was our composer that we commissioned. And so I got some experience in building a consortium,
Hmm.
because she had a certain fee that we needed to reach. And so then we made a website and started advertising, this is a commission that we're doing. It's going to be great. Here's the things you get when you're involved. Not to mention you're supporting the creation of new music. How cool is that? And we fairly easily raised all the funds that we needed to. And in all honesty, a lot of it came from college teachers who were
Mm.
interested in having horn ensemble music,
Yes.
and specifically new horn ensemble music,
Hmm.
and a young woman of color, incredibly talented person.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of the lack of repertoire for horn right now is in the like horn ensemble area.
Mm.
You can find the same old horn choir pieces over and over. I'm sure we've all played
Mhm.
Farewell to Red Castle, and it's a great piece. But it's nice to keep expanding that repertoire. So that's so great that you guys focused on that particularly.
Yeah.
So obviously, since people approach you with performances in mind, you don't have to worry about getting your music performed. But do you find this is something I've learned from some other composers that people don't always tell you when they're playing your music, and does that
Oh
affect
yeah.
things? Okay, yeah.
All the time.
I know I'm guilty of it. I've played two of your pieces now, and I probably have never told you that I. I
Did you send
know.
me programs?
No, because I didn't know you yet, and I was terrified. So go
Okay.
figure. Yeah, this would have been
I'm really
in.
scary though.
Oh, I know, clearly. Yeah. No, this would have been in, when did I play them? May? No, February of 2020, right before the pandemic. It was my second doctoral
Mm.
recital. I played to the seasons. And then
Mm.
during my artist diploma, I did the sonata. But so obviously that's something that you would encourage people who play your music to send you a program, and that's important because that goes, are you ASCAP? Is that the
Yeah.
publisher? Okay.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit about why that matters?
Yes. And it's totally no skin off the back of performers, honestly. So if you're going to be playing someone's music and they're alive, you should write to them and say, "Hey, I'm playing your work, and here's a copy of the program."
Mm-hmm.
And with that program, we as a composer submit it to our organization that we belong to. I belong to ASCAP. BMI is another one.
Mm-hmm.
And when we submit that program to ASCAP, then they will pay us performance royalties. So the performer themselves doesn't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
The organization will pay the performance royalties.
So that's
So
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you're really helping the composers whenever you play a living composer's work and you
Mm-hmm.
send them a copy of the program. You're helping them support their future compositional endeavors,
Right.
whatever those may be.
Yeah, I think that's something we're not really taught. So much of the music we play is by
Yeah,
people who are dead, so like, why would we know to send that information along?
right. Oh, I certainly didn't know that. And I also was a little afraid when I was younger
Hmm.
to contact someone whose work I was playing. One, because I thought, well, why would they want to hear from me? That's
Exactly.
okay. I'm nobody, so
Exactly. And there's something about seeing that like composer's name on the like very fancy printed copy that oh, they're real. They're a superstar.
mm,
They've been published, and that
yeah.
adds that extra intimidating factor, I think.
Yeah. I think that I'm small enough that I still don't have the sense that I'm unapproachable. Maybe,
Hmm.
maybe some people might think that because they've seen my name on programs or whatever. But in all honesty, most composers, unless they're super famous and they have their own manager and whatnot,
Hmm.
most composers are very approachable. And I love getting emails when I open my email and I've got an email in there that says, "Hey, I'm playing your piece." I'm like, "That's so cool." It's exciting.
Well, that's why you wrote it, is for people to play it, right? So,
That's right.
and then is there a time, I'm curious about this for my own edification, is there a time limit to when you have to submit these programs? So, like for my piece, or when I played my recital, have we missed that deadline for you to submit that?
I can't remember.
Okay, I'll have to do some
Um,
digging.
yeah, I will have to do some digging on that too. I thought I saw something a little while ago that I was surprised. I had in my mind that it was like you had to do the same year, but I feel like there's actually a few years that in time you can submit it.
Okay, well, in that case,
But
I'll
I
be emailing you my programs.
great. Yeah, I
I should
don't
do
know.
that
It's
anyways,
not
but
for sure. I don't
right.
know.
Well, I should send them to you anyway, so you just have, it's the thing.
Yeah.
But okay, great. So we'll move on to more of the music industry portion now. What do you feel have been the greatest challenges of your career as in any aspect of professor or composer or performer?
Hmm. That's kind of a tough question. Because for whatever reason in my life, if I come up to something that seems challenging, I guess I break it down and I move through it. And so at the end, it's like, well, that a challenge? Yes, it was. But
Yeah, I mean,
I
you did a
got
whole
I
dissertation,
got through
so
it. So yeah.
right.
Um, so there's all different sorts of challenges, and one challenge that I feel is to always keep growing. At the beginning of every single project, this is a thought I always have. What if I can't come up with anything new and interesting? What if I've already written my best stuff? always think that at the beginning of every project. So I have to get past that, and usually the way I get past that is I start improvising. I let myself marinate in a creative space. I do a lot of listening to different things. Maybe I give myself some really specific parameters. And when I do that, when I start breaking it down into process, there's always a path forward that you can take. I would say another challenge is getting my music out there. There's a lot of repertoire choices available for performers, and it's pretty common um, for players to play who they know, and it's really common for players to play who their favorites and their friends and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so I find it's challenging to break through to players who don't know me personally and who have their own favorites that
Sure.
they like to go back to. So having your music played at symposia, conferences, getting it on recordings, having friends in high places doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt, I mean.
Right.
Yeah, so I've got some great friends like Mark Robbins at the Seattle Symphony, who has honestly been an incredible supporter of my work from day one, really. And he's played a bunch of my pieces and has commissioned a few of them. So having friends like that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's having that kind of, it's not, mentor is the wrong word, but it's like just support system, I guess. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
just
he's a colleague,
mhm.
but yeah, like this person who's a little cheer team.
Right. Yeah, I was trying to come up with a better word. I was like, mentor is wrong, and I'm talking about somebody who's there. But yeah, just I like cheer team. That's great. Now this is the heavy question I always ask. Do you feel that you've experienced any hardships based on your gender identity?
I probably have, and in some cases didn't even know it. Overall, I feel like I've been incredibly fortunate to have the opportunities that I've had. I have been very fortunate, and I want to acknowledge that. I know that others aren't as fortunate. I've had a lot of privileges that have allowed me to gain footing easier than others. But in thinking back to my young self, going back to that first story I told about my choir teacher, I'm a little surprised that no one encouraged me to go into composition as I was younger, because I was writing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote stuff, and nobody encouraged me to go into composition until grad school.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
And yeah, and I wonder if my gender was a part of that,
Mm-hmm.
because um, young lady, what's she gonna do as a composer? That's not who composers are.
Right. Oh, there's been studies that show
So
that when people think of the word composer, they immediately think of men. You know, it's a whole thing.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that if I had been male and shown an inclination to write music,
Mm-hmm.
that my teachers would have encouraged me and pushed me to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But up until grad school, it was more of, oh, that's nice. But nobody seemed to think it was a path I should take.
Right.
So it makes me much more aware of how I interact with young women and with people of color who demonstrate an interest in writing music. And I'm very aware if someone comes to me with a little inkling or a spark, that I want to cultivate that and encourage them to do that.
And in your own horn studio, do you carry on Douglas Hill's tradition of having your students compose?
Mostly it comes in the form of cadenzas. Yeah. But every once in a while we'll do an exercise where I'll have them all write etudes. And in fact, during the pandemic, that was a thing that we did where we couldn't get together. So I had everybody write an etude for themselves, and we compiled them all and created a book
Oh, cool.
out of the etudes. And some
Hmm.
of them were really great. There was actually one having to do with concussions,
Oh gosh.
because one of my students had a really bad concussion, and so she wrote. I'm not sure if it was quite an A, more of a study on. No, there was some playing involved, but like how to come back from and recover in this concussed situation.
Wow, how creative. And I
Yeah.
that would have never occurred to me to use composition as an outlet for that kind of,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
process. Are those etudes published anywhere, or they just live in the horn studio?
No, they just live in a Google folder somewhere.
Ah, that's great. Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah. But going back to your gender question, I it's getting better, but historically the world of composers has been kind of a boys club mentality, and people tend to gravitate towards interacting with and promoting their friends. And when men have historically had privilege, it
Hmm.
leads to more opportunities for men, and then the cycle goes until we intentionally break it,
Right,
which is what people are doing. So
right.
projects like yours are bringing other people into the conversation and breaking the cycle whereby we just keep promoting the people who've always had the privilege.
That's the whole point of this, is I'm just trying to give space for composers to, you know, get their voices heard. That's the whole point. There's so many different variety of people who are writing music, and it's nice
Mhm.
to even the try and even the playing ground as much as possible. And the same is kind of true in where I what I do, which is freelancing. It's all word of mouth, and so I'm frequently on stages where I am the only woman brass player, and I'm talking like the
Mhm.
only woman brass player. And you look around, and it's because these are all drinking buddies. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the people on stage; they're all perfectly nice, usually. But so if you're not in that club that hangs out, you might not get the next gig. And so we have to be our own megaphone, and
Mhm.
amplify ourselves. So yeah, it's the same in different spheres of music for sure. If you could change one thing about the music industry, what would it be?
Ooh, hmm, that's a good question. I suppose if I could change one thing, it would be that, well, that's kind of more of a human nature thing. Going back,
Well, they're not unrelated.
yeah, going back to that thing where we really just kind of stick with who we know and what we know.
Hmm.
And I guess I would change that we're a bit more willing to get out of our comfort spheres and get to know
Hmm.
people that we don't know, and get to know music, other types of music that we don't know.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I guess, as a person who has now taught a music class that focuses on music that's non-Western, I've really learned a lot, and I used to be quite an elite when it came to types of music. I was like, well,
Hmm.
I like the right music, I like the good music. And
Oh, I'm so guilty of anti-EDM bias. I can't even tell you. I'm terribly guilty of it.
so in teaching this class and really living in spaces with other types of music making, I've developed the mantra that there is room for everything, and not everybody's going to like everything. But all of these different traditions of music making have come about because they're very culture related and time and place related, and they mean something to people. And we shouldn't and we can't belittle other people for something that really means something to them. So I guess in the music world, I would change musical elitism if I could.
Hmm. That's a good one. It's a really good one. I know this was a couple years ago at one of the musicology conferences. People were passing around "I hate Beethoven" cards just
Oh.
to get reactions out of people. And the number of people who got really, really upset, when it was all entirely a joke, it was
Mm.
entertaining to hear the feedback. So
Mm.
I'll just
I'm
say, put it that way,
curious.
put it
Yeah.
lightly. I know I kind of want to do the thought experiment now and see what would happen if I did that at any places I work. But
Yeah.
anyways, so do you feel that the representation of diverse compositional voices in classical music is getting better, or what can we do to keep pushing forward with this?
I do think it's getting better, and a lot of people are trying. The
Hmm.
numbers still tell us that women and people of color are not performed nearly as often as men. So if you take a look at almost any program, be it a recital or an ensemble concert, still the majority of performed composers are white men. Um, as a woman, I'm especially bothered by the gender gap because, regardless of race, women make up half the women's population. So you would think that in the performance of modern music, women would make up half at least of the music performed, but we don't.
Nope.
So it's commonly said that representation matters, and
Mm-hmm.
young people need to hear diverse voices. They need to be able to see people like them doing beautiful things so they can imagine it for themselves. Um, so there's a need for diversity of voices, different types of styles, different people entering the conversation. There isn't any music in the world that everyone likes. So we
Mm-hmm.
need many musics to speak for the diversity of people in the world. So it is getting better. Another
Mm-hmm.
thing too that I think can happen, start off with a lot of energy and say, I'm gonna play these pieces, I'm gonna find this music by these voices, and then kind of be peter out and get tired and say, well, you know what, it's easier just to go back to Beethoven.
Right. Let's go play Adagio and Allegro again, you know?
Yeah, right. Which, that music is great. I would like to point out that it doesn't have to be either or, it can be
Mm-hmm.
and it can be also. So it's not like women are trying to replace men, or it's not like composers of color are trying to replace white composers. But
Mm-hmm.
historically, they've been there, but they haven't had the opportunity to be heard.
How do you approach programming recitals with your students at the university?
I always prod them and say, what do you think about uh, pieces for women? Or what do you think about pieces by composers of color?
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually really open to it. PLU is very much a place where we highlight DEI
Mm-hmm.
and representation and stuff. And our students are sensitive to these issues. And so they want to find other voices. So yeah, we always take a look at it and say, whose music are we playing? Yeah, let's look at the people that have the standard repertoire. Let's learn that. There's definitely value and worth there. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
that. But let's also look for pieces that you really like that are newer, that are
Mm-hmm.
by people that we haven't heard from as much.
And have you ever been introduced to new pieces that you've really fallen in love with through helping your students?
I have been introduced to new repertoire. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Um, I'm not
Oh
not
yeah, I
off the
love an
top of my
example.
head.
Yeah.
Bah.
I know, sorry, right on the
Off the
spot.
top of my head, no. And I'm so terrible with names. I'll be working with something for a long time, and then a month later, it's like, what was the name of that thing?
I know, I'll forget what pieces I've played. It'll be 2 years later, and I'm like, have I played this symphony before? And it's like Brahms too. And I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, no, I did, like 2 years ago. It's so funny.
yeah.
But yeah, I
But
understand.
my students do come in with new stuff, and I tell them, I say, go out if you're interested, and bring
Hmm.
stuff in. And if I don't know it, that's awesome. Let's learn
Yeah.
it.
And if they ever find anything that's not in my database, please let me know because I'm trying to
Mm,
add to it
mm,
all the time. It's a growing project, and that's the beauty of it.
yeah,
So, and that's a lot of work to keep up with because people are composing new things all the time, and I'm always like,
yeah.
oh no, someone new I missed. Ah, but we're trying. So, great. So now that was the heavy portion. So we'll move on to the fun stuff. What hobbies and activities do you do for fun outside of music?
So my one hobby, yes, I know professors don't have a lot of time for hobbies,
No.
but my one hobby is aerial silks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That must be hard.
it is hard, yes.
It's like all the core strength.
Yeah. It is hard, and unfortunately I can only do it once a week. So it's like practicing. You can get to a certain level, but
Hmm.
if you can't do it consistently, you don't
Hmm.
you don't get a lot better. So but
Right.
I really enjoy it. It's creative, it's
Hmm.
artistic. I would say that's why I like doing aerial silks, because it's the most creative and artistic way I've found to live.
And how did you get into that?
I got into this kind of funny story. So when I was in grad school, I went to school with a young woman named Danielle Kane, and she's a horn player. She still plays some, but actually she got into pole dancing,
Oh, cool.
and I would see these posts from her about what she was learning, and I was like, that is incredible.
Mm-hmm. I'm so impressed by people who can do that.
Yeah, like the athleticism and this flexibility needed to do that is really wild. So
Mm-hmm.
in 2012, one summer, the summer of 2012, I was like, I'm gonna do that. So I found a studio. I found a studio in the area, and I started learning pole dancing. Um, and did that for a while. But then the studio started offering aerials. They started offering aerial hoop, and so I did that. And then finally, they started offering aerial silks, which is what I had really wanted to do. And so finally got into that.
I take it you're not afraid of heights then.
No, but I find that as I'm getting older, if I know my strength, the limit of my strength. So if I know I'm tired and I'm up near the ceiling, I'm not gonna risk it.
No. Have you ever fallen?
Yes,
Oh,
I have fallen and not hit the floor. I actually hit a knot at the end of the fabric and very, very badly sprained my ankle.
oh, that's awful. Hmm.
Yeah, it was not fun. I was on crutches for a week.
I've sprained my ankle, the same ankle, 3 times in 2 years, and it's
Ooh.
no fun. And the last time was I literally stepped in a hole while taking out the trash. See, that your story was at least more exciting. So mine, I just stepped in a hole.
Nah,
But
I know,
gosh,
yeah.
giving up the ghost on me. Um, so, what is a piece of advice you have for young composers who are maybe just starting out?
hmm I would say do a lot of listening
Hmm.
and really get to know the music that you play.
Hmm.
Because, like for me, I never studied composition formally, but I studied it informally via all of the music that I learned in
Hmm.
studio lessons, in ensembles, in my daily life, in listening. I was basically studying composition, but I didn't know it. So, if you're wanting to get into composing, realize that you are studying it in all of these arenas where you're already engaged in your private lessons and your ensembles and your daily listening. And then you can start to be analytical and observant about the way things are put together and how they work.
And do you have any advice for young performers maybe who want to start, I don't know, commissioning their friends, who are around them or something
Mm.
along that line?
Yeah, I suppose for young performers who want to commission, might think about like the crowdsourcing
Hmm.
method of funding.
Hmm.
So I know it's really hard to find a lot of money when you're young,
Right.
when you're a young person. If you're side by side in the same grade or whatever as another composer, a lot of times you can work with each other, and it's more of the learning process. And maybe you're working with some composers who are studying as students, and so a lot of students will write stuff for their classes. They'll write it for composer forums or whatever. And so those are some chances where people are writing stuff already for their compositional study, so
Hmm.
you might be able to get in on that.
Oh, and you said listening is your big advice for composers. Who are you listening to as you're starting your wind ensemble process here? I'm curious about that.
mm, yeah, well, I've got big long list of people whose names I can't remember, but
I know, I keep asking you for names. I'm sorry.
yeah, well, I'm gonna be listening to Kelly anyway. That's one of
Hmm.
the names. I'm gonna be writing a piece that's about grade 3,
Hmm.
top grade 4. So
Which is
meant
advanced
to
high
be,
school.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's meant to be accessible to high school bands
that's great.
and your university band that wants to play something really well.
Hmm.
Um, but I've got a bunch of female composers that I'll probably get in touch with, like Alex Shapiro. She's around in this area.
Oh, cool.
Um, Jody Blackshaw. Kathy
Hmm.
is
Love
somebody
Kathy.
who you might know. Yeah,
I know Kathy.
she's
Yep.
kind of like yeah, an honorary horn person.
Very much so.
Um, yeah.
That's
So
so great.
and oh Lauren Bernofsky, I think is someone I'll go to when I want to write for strings.
Yeah. She's got a really good
Yeah.
handle on that, which is so cool. And you haven't written anything for strings yet, right?
No, not really. I started writing a piece and I've got like 3 minutes and it hasn't gone. I've started like 2 years ago. And then I got all these commissions. I'm like, well, I'm not doing that anymore.
Right. And this is kind of unrelated. Do you ever have more than one commission going
Yeah,
at
I
once, or
do.
is it kind of like you're on that one piece? Is it hard switching back and forth?
No, I usually, even though I have the commissions going on at once, I only write one piece at a time, kind of.
Ah, I gotcha.
So
So you can focus.
I can focus, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine otherwise it would get like really easy to repeat yourself and put things in the wrong place and stuff like that. So that's what I would do anyways.
I never find myself doing that. No, I'm in very different places with whatever I'm
Well, that's
writing.
nice.
Yeah, I don't mix them up, really.
Oh, good for you. That would be my problem. I would wind up and be like, oh yeah, that sonata's turning into that brass trio. Okay, cool.
That's the wrong place.
Right. So obviously you have commissions going on right now. Do you have any upcoming projects or pieces you'd like to share or promote?
Well, I do want to promote the Pale Blue Dot. I think that's a really cool piece. That's it's already done, but I'll probably release it to the world next spring. So keep your eye out for
Very
that.
cool.
It's for solo horn and fixed media, and there's a video component, and it's a piece about climate change if you haven't seen it already. Yeah, and I'm working on a horn, tuba, piano trio right now, which
That's
is
so perfect.
commissioned by Heidi Lucas's group, the Eastern Standard Trio. And it's going to be a collection of miniatures. And that's the one where I'm currently trying to learn how to write for disco.
So cool.
Spoiler alert. And then the newest one on my plate is this wind ensemble project, which we're looking at next fall for that to be done. And I have no idea. We're at the moment where I have no idea what it's going to be. And I'm currently asking myself, what if I can't come up with anything?
Well, based on your past history, I imagine that won't end up being a problem.
So let's listen to this podcast again in a year and say, ha!
Yeah, we found it. Oh, I love that. Well, Gina, we've come to the end. I appreciate you so much for coming on. Like I said, you've been one of my, or maybe I didn't say this, you've been one of my favorite composers for a couple years now. And you're actually, not to, blow smoke or anything, but you're one of the composers who helped inspire my project.
Oh, great.
Because To the Seasons wound up on my recital, and I was trying to do all women composers, and I was like, why is this not out in the world? And so I'd been gathering all of these, references for myself in a spreadsheet of like, okay, people that I like and are cool, and I'm gonna start writing them down. And I started having people come to me and asking for recommendations, and I was like, well, this needs to get out in the world so people can find music. So yeah, you're one of the founding people here, along with Kathy is another one, and yeah, there's a whole bunch. So yeah, I'm so excited to have been able to have you on today. So.
Yeah, it's great. I appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a labor of love. So but all right, so everyone, what I'll do is post links to your page in the social medias for this so people can come find your music and recordings and whatnot. And I believe you have quite a few recordings on YouTube that people can go and listen to. And I think there's some SoundClouds too, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, there's so much accessible. So I hope everyone will go and check out your works.
Thank you.
Again, thanks so much. And I hope I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been Represent the Podcast. For more episodes, you can find us at Spotify and Apple Podcasts or on my website, www.caitibethmckinney.com. If you liked what you heard today, please rate us 5 stars or leave a review. Thank you for listening.